All right, Panther Lair, I'm going to do a series here talking about the various ball screens that Kyle Filipowski was involved in against the Pittsburgh Panthers on Tuesday night, how Pitt chose to defend them, what they were willing to concede in those situations, what they were hoping not to concede in those situations. Was it effective? Was it not? So let's dive into it. The first set of screens I'm going to look at are the up screens that Filipowski set in the half court for Duke here. There's 3 sequences, and basically Filipowski is going to come from somewhere down low, maybe not always super low, but he's going to come up the court to the top of the circle and set a screen for a player there. So you'll see in this first clip, he rises up, sets this screen here on this pitch back. Now, I'm just going to say it now that I think the onus of this falls more on the guards than anybody else in terms of Pitt not being successful defending Filipowski in ball screens, because for the most part, other than this clip, no one ever goes under a screen. So for the most part, they're trying to go over top of screens. They did not want to concede 3-pointers. The other thing you're not going to see is Pitt was never going to switch any of these screens, right? They were not going to put a big on one of the Duke's athletic quick guards, and they were not going to put a smaller player on Filipowski for the most part, other than Zach Austin, but they still never switched that. But this one does involve Austin. He fights under here. One of the things that made the up screen defense a little bit better is, for the most part, they either the trailing screener's defender, in this case, right, the defender for Filipowski, either could be up the touch or in some type of drop point, and that's what you kind of see here a little bit with Guillermo. Is not quite up the touch, but he's in a little bit of a drop, not really distinguishable, but for the purposes of labeling, that's kind of where he's at. And this works because of the position of the guard. So in this instance, I mean, Austin's more forward, but, the ball screener or the ball handler's defender. So Austin's able to stay in front here, and this is the one thing I think the Panthers probably should have tried a little bit more, is relying on their guards to stay in front of guys. Sometimes that's their own fault because of positioning and how quickly or not quickly they got over the screens. But other than the Louisville game, I don't really remember recently where Pitt just kind of bled a lot in terms of dribble penetration. So I think they should have gambled with that. There was a couple sequences like Leggett had a nice one in this game that resulted in an Austin steal early in the game where they held up pretty well. So this one works out because Austin basically stays in front of the ball handler. And so with the drop, like, Filipowski can't do very much here, and they have to go elsewhere to try to get a basket. Now, that's the other thing, is Duke was really able to capitalize on Pitt's rotations with their crisp ball movement and the fact they have just so many weapons. And you'll see that here. I'm not really sure why Guillermo sagged so far off of this. Like, he'll get lost in no man's land here. I know Hinson's not going to challenge this at the rim, but you'll see Guillermo never really can do much of anything. And he contests this at the end, but I'm just not sure he should have left Filipowski that much. Here we go, another up screen. Again, this one is a much more distinguishable drop point, and because he's going to go into Bub Carrington here, who's not quite helping out of the strong side corner, but he's kind of splitting here, this is going to really help deter and force this as a contested shot. Again, I think these up screens were the things they were effective in defending for the most part, but Duke did not really run a lot of these. They ran a lot more other things that we'll talk about. So you'll see here, Jalen is going to fight over. Does get screened, though, because of the immediate help from Bub. It pretty much prevents any type of drive, and then Guillermo is able to hold his place here, and then ultimately you just see a contested shot. So this is the third example of an up screen. So we saw that one kind of more similar to the one we saw in the first clip. So Federico arrives a little bit late, so he mostly gets up the touch. But the key here is just the positioning and the timing. And some of this is on the Blue Devils. But Zach Austin is able to just contain dribble penetration for the most part initially, and then he holds up on the drive. He just goes stride for the most part. Austin, who is a good shot blocker at the rim, especially if he's trailing somebody. So this is a positive for the Panthers. You'll see Federico does eventually get up the touch, but because the Duke player is going early here, it doesn't really have Filipowski or Fede in the play, and then they end up forcing a turnover. So I thought the defense on the up screens was pretty good. Duke didn't run, like I said, they only ran like 3. I mean, I pretty much watched every single ball screen involving Filipowski and clipped them all for the purposes of this. So this is an example where they did a decent job, but I think, again, the onus was on the guards. You saw here that Austin was able to kind of be in front to start the ball screen on 2 of those occasions. On the other, the player ran right in to help. So that was effective. Unfortunately for Pitt, Duke didn't run a lot of these.